Welcome to the messy middle. We do not have an intro video this week because Frank has yet to put one together. I think we're on our 18th episode, maybe,
Yeah,
but
but
that's
I
okay.
went to watch June 2 and now I'm like, it changed everything the way I wanted to do it. Now it's going to be very different. Like I see it, like
Oh
it's going to be
no.
beautiful.
Yes, you're our creative director that never creates, just in your brain. This is our third guest, our third founder interview. I'm thrilled to have Dennis Mortensen here. Um, Joining us from New York, though originally from Denmark, serial entrepreneur, serial successful entrepreneur, not just a serial entrepreneur, who's built some fantastic companies. One that I've used a few of them, including x.ai. We're thrilled to have you again well, not again, but thrilled to have you here today. And it's going to be a fun conversation. We're going to be talking about um, a few different topics. We'll get into your background and get it going. So I'll pass over to Frank and Teddy, and this is going to be a fantastic conversation.
So yeah, just to jump right in, like, Dennis, just to recontextualize like what we're doing here, we want to talk about something few people talk about, which is how do you deal with your post-exit life? And, everybody has like different ways of doing that. Like some people just enjoy retirement. Some other people go through, I don't know, like spiritual stuff. Other people end up, I don't know, but you are doing something that I guess a lot of our friends are doing, but I'd be curious to understand the mechanics of it, which is you keep building and building and building and building. So it'd be nice. Like we'll talk about a bunch of things. What's life about, what you should do, like all these things, but also, do you have any lesson learned and all of that? And I don't know. I'll pass it to Teddy. But the other thing also, um, which I think is pretty cool, is like the life journey. Because I remember, tell me if I'm incorrect, but if I remember correctly, you used to be a demo maker. And
Yeah.
so I think that's something else that's pretty cool, which is you are a really, really hardcore developer. And it's going to be nice also to kind of think about how these cycles happen when, from coding in assembly and floppy disk to now, AI, which obviously a lot too. And passing it to Teddy, and then we'll start bouncing.
Yeah, I don't want to throw a bunch of questions. I would love to hear a couple different things. Like there's one piece you've been working in a company for the company you founded for 8 years, and then you started immediately with something new. So that's an experience that I want to hear about. But also what Frank said now, your kind of early days as a developer builder. So maybe you can just give us a little bit of intro from that like early days.
Sure. That's a lot of questions from a lot of people, from a lot
We
of
have time.
angles. So if you have just one
You
question,
start as you want.
and then I can just go bananas for 45 minutes and we close up shop. That's your setup, and I like it. Um, doesn't provide me much resistance. I do think I can throw out a few comments
Hmm.
for you to then push back on. And remember, anything which I say is obviously not gospel, and it is aggressively biased. As in,
You mean you don't want to be an Instagram influencer and be like the 5 tips to, succeeding and everything?
so, but I think it goes beyond that actually. So here's my assumption. I imagine many of those people on Instagram are well aware of them not knowing for a fact that something which they put up is necessarily true, but they do it for eyeballs, sponsorships, and what have you. And hey, I respect the hustle. I think this is different though, which is
New
that
York.
we as entrepreneurs tell ourselves something and we fucking believe it. As in, I'm not hustling anybody. I believe it. As in, it's gospel to my inner mind. And in that regard, I think we diverge in that sense. Now, to provide a few points, and then we can kind of branch out from there. First, I think anybody doing anything entrepreneurial or just the traditional startup, however you choose to kind of define it, I think we're close enough in our alignment there, should assume that it does not work out and you'll have a sudden instant death, and anything which comes out of it is a miracle. So if those are the odds, and having anything else in mind is just ludicrous. You can be optimistic.
Is that how you pitch your investors?
Oh, I think if you tell your investors anything else, you're an idiot. As in, I believe, I'm ambitious, I'll lean in, I'll work 7 days a week, but we're probably going to die. If you somehow want me to say something else, why are we even
Fuck
talking?
you, yeah.
But we can talk about that later as well. I actually think you get much, much further in pitching the truth versus some sort of imaginary setting where we speak a language where we both agree these are all lies, but none of us can say anything in regards to those lies. How about we just all speak truths? We might just increase the probability of survival ever so slightly. Now, that aside, if we know that they're probably not going to work out, and the whole thing is some sort of idea for where only the portfolio can win, which is why not many, but a few VCs can survive fund after fund, because they have some sort of portfolio for where they almost all die, but a few win. And I'm not saying anything which we don't know already, but if only a few win, pick any funnel. I don't know, some fund, a couple $100 million, they get 1,000 at the top, they kind of look at half, the first half just dies immediately at the top, the next half they'll skim, get down to 1,000, a few they'll kind of read, further down they'll kind of have an associate kind of meet, further down they might even have a partner chat, further down you might even have a partner meeting on a Monday, further down they might even send a few kind of offer letters, and all the way at the bottom they'll write a $4 million check. But in that funnel, they somehow assume that in their knowledge along the way, they can delete some of the bad ones and hopefully bet on some of the good ones. But even in that setting, and the funnel doesn't look like this, it looks more like this, they'll only pick a few winners. So it seems dramatically naive if you as an entrepreneur assume I'll do one startup, I end up at the bottom, and mine is a winner. Because if you're that good, you probably even shouldn't do startup. You should do investing. Because you're a really good picker. So
I don't want to diverge yet, but I would say that it's a good thing to be naive too, and you kind of lose that when you've done it once.
I actually, I think you can be positively naive on many things and optimistic. I'm super optimistic myself, but I also think there's value in being attached to reality. So if that is your setting, you should probably look at that and say, well, they run a fund in parallel, which I cannot do. That's another footnote we can talk about. I fucking hate other entrepreneurs who sit on boards and angel invest and do all sorts of other things. But that's a pet peeve of mine. And I'm probably wrong, but I'm just not.
So you like focus. So basically, you want to be like maniacally focused on getting it done, even though you know in the beginning you have whatever 0.0 chance, 0.01 or chance of succeeding. So
what if I could change that 0.01 to 1.012 because I didn't have to sit in a board meeting or didn't have to sit in on some pitch or didn't have to write a check or didn't have to do many other things, just this. I'm almost kind of, I don't know about you guys, almost kind of embarrassed when I see one of my friends write an angel check and pitch it on LinkedIn. Hey, just invested. You're an idiot. Like, if you're trying to dazzle me, I am the opposite of dazzled here. Now, let me get back to the first part of the story. If that's their funnel and they do that in parallel, you should probably somehow imagine you doing something similar, but you can't do it in parallel. You have to do it in serial, meaning that you're not running the 4-year fund like any VC. You're running the 50-year fund, which is that you can probably do 8-10 ventures over a lifetime. They're all going to fail, but one of them, which will be kind of half okay. That's your fund, 50 years. Now, if you need to do 50 years, you probably don't really need much time in between. That's just wasted energy. You just need to kind of do one, die, make a few monies, whatever. Once done, you get started on the next one. That's my portfolio. I'm on number 6 and 28 years in. So I still have, 20 good years and another 4 ventures in me.
So we're competing because I always thought about myself as I want to be the oldest entrepreneur. I want to beat Colonel Sanders. But but you're right, So you're at number 6.
We can add some emotion to it, which is that here's another pet peeve of mine. Oh, this is going to be the podcast of hate, and I'm actually just a really nice guy. But here's another pet peeve.
These are some great Instagram clips for Teddy to put together on TikTok
Oh
and
yeah,
Reels.
Oh,
I'm a nice guy.
out of context, let's just look at that and say, I don't think I like that guy. But here's another pet peeve, which is that it's very easy for people to call themselves founders or entrepreneurs. And most people don't really attach much value to it. For me, it means a lot. It's kind of like, I don't know, being a pro footballer or something like that, for where it is your identity. You actually care about it. You do it for the love of the sport. I don't do it for the title or the trophies. I do it for the love of the sport. And if you just somehow manage to assemble the courage and energy and stamina to do one, and once you've done one, you might have won a few monies or you might not, and you kind of surrender, go work for McKinsey or BCG or what have you. Were you ever really an entrepreneur, or did you just kind of take a punch to the face for a few years and then you kind of escape? If you really are a pro footballer and you do it for the love of the sport, why wouldn't you keep playing?
I feel like we can make T-shirts out of that conversation. Like it's like,
Well, it's like the musician who could play for 0 people or play for 10,000 people. They put on the same show, and
Same
and
now.
you
I actually think that's even better. I'm going to steal that, because the point is they play because, hey, I actually like the art or the enjoyment I get from it. And I think, and again, we've all done some part of this journey. It is hard. It is kind of uphill and all sorts of other kind of things. But you have to almost do it because you enjoy the journey. If there's some sort of outcome, that's really just almost secondary. Because if you play for that, you're rarely going to get to it. It's kind of like any pro sport. If you play for the trophy, you're not going to win any. If you play for the other sport, you might stumble into a trophy at some point. And I think this is the same.
have you ever faced? Okay, so let's get into sort of the messy and we didn't even talk about your background and everything, because we kind of, the way we like to do the messy middle is
I'm sorry,
people should
maybe
do the research. Yeah,
just to add,
Frank?
Gabriel, I'm curious to know. It doesn't sound messy to Dennis. It's like
No, it doesn't. That's
like
what
the
I was
very
going to
clear
ask. I
middle.
was going to
It's
say,
there's no messiness. Like
is it messy or no? Do you ever get emotional in between
all right,
between them, or you're
I
just
sold
like,
my startup. Now
boom?
it's 5 months break, and then I go back.
So I only came on this podcast to say I think you have a shitty title, because I don't believe in the messy middle. And once I've kind of delivered that message, I'll just kind of hang up, and I'll be kind of your 12-minute podcast. Like, he came in, he screamed, and he left. I don't think there is any messy middle. The messy middle suggests to me that there's something that didn't go as planned. Why would it be messy in the middle? If anything, it should be the exciting middle, which is that I just did my 4-minute mile. I trained for it forever. I'm super proud. I get to exhale a little bit. I go back. We all have different strategies for how we find our ideas. I go back to my list I hate, and then I look at those 17 pages of ideas that I've assembled over the last kind of 4 or 5 years.
Can we zoom on that, because that I feel like that's worth talking about, or we can zoom on it after. But like, so you do have a process. So again, like let's take x.ai. So you sell the x.ai. If you want to talk about that at all, but then what happens?
Sure.
You go back home, you take a coffee, and you write down stuff. Like what's the process?
Just a quick
Of
side
your exciting middle.
Yeah. So for the exciting middle, which will be the new renamed podcast title, for the kind of moment where you exit, if you exit anything of value outside of the team itself, you are probably at least either emotionally or legally locked in to make sure that they have some sort of positive outcome of that acquisition. Some will get locked in for years on end. Some will have some sort of earn-out and all sorts of kind of ills attached to it. But, that's not the point. I've been very fortunate to not have any legal lockup on any of the past 3 exits that we've done.
So no 3 years earn-out, and
nothing. Just everything upfront on the day.
Was it intentional? Like, did you push for that, or it just kind of landed on your laps?
Yeah. But if you then leave 3 days later, you can never do that deal again. As in, you burned that bridge. So if I go back, when we sold to Yahoo, it was all upfront. We stayed for, I think, 18 months to make sure that was well integrated. So they acquired us for $10, and when we left, it should feel like $12. It should feel like that was a awesome acquisition. When we sold to
And which company was that? That was.
we did something called Index Tools. It turned into Yahoo Web Analytics. You should imagine Google Analytics. We just sold to Yahoo. My buddy sold to Google. That turned into Google Analytics. So JavaScript tagging and real-time analytics. Or we can go really geeky on that. So I'll do that just for the fun of it. Because remember, certainly you, Frank, will be old enough to remember, but there was a time for where disks were magnetic and they would spin around and you would read that disk and you would have a certain number of rounds per minute that you could do in that disk, which was pretty much how fast you could read. And to make the most of those disks,
put them close to each other.
Yeah, but most an OS will kind of have a chunk which you read from that disk, depending on the type of file system that you have. But we would actually write our own file system so that when you read a chunk, it's exactly one spin on the disk. So when you get to the other side, you can immediately start to read again. On average, you would lose about 40% just on free spinning without reading. So we did a new file system, which we wrote. And then on top of that, we did a new database. And then on top of that, we did a new query language, because we did a column-based database. Most databases are row-based, right? Select first name from customers. You get a set of rows. But in analytics, it's really all about aggregation and summing. So you need to really do a column-based database. So we did that to get about 7 seconds latency databases back 20 years ago on magnetic disks, I have to say. Sorry. Didn't have anything to do. You can just delete this. But
that was awesome.
Attached
So okay, you sold to Yahoo. Boom, you were there 18 months.
But we did a deal for where there was no earnout. Having done that once and stayed for a year and a half to fully integrate this to their success. Then when we sold to Outbrain, we did the same deal, saying, "Hey, we are stand-up people, for we have some pride, some real pride attached to the engineering that we've done. So we wanted to be successful on the other side. We can't sign anything though. You have to trust me, but you can call all sorts of people to verify that I'm not full of bullshit." Now, they did, and we didn't commit to anything. We stayed put for 14 months, had the whole thing well integrated. When we sold x.ai to Visible, same setting, where there was no earnout, and stayed for, I think, 16 months, something like that. So if you do a really good integration and be honest with the acquirer on, I have no corporate ambition. As in, don't spend any clock cycles on trying to imagine some title for where Dennis is happy. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care at all. What I do care about, though, is that when I leave, the 7 things you wanted to achieve, I delivered on. And you should tell me upfront what you want from this acquisition. Then I'll make sure it happens. And if I can't deliver, we shouldn't even do it to begin with. Because you'll be unhappy, and you being unhappy is going to give me a future discount in some other exit I might do. So I can't have you not be happy. So I'll rather just say, "Hey, what do you think you're going to buy? I can't give you. I can't sell that." So in that regard, we've been very fortunate. Now,
but the cost of that is you have to reduce your price, right? If there's no earnout, so it's.
I don't think so.
No, okay.
I think the earnout is just a forced setting to make sure.
You're a good negotiator. You keep the same price and you get no earnout.
Goals, right?
Okay.
And since many times they haven't even really imagined or written down their goals, but that's for amateurs. Then you should force them to do so. And what they just do instead is saying, "Hey, in 4 years we can probably do it. I don't know what it is entirely just yet. Don't give me that. You write it down, then I'll do it as fast as possible. You don't even want me to spend 4 years on it. You want me to do it as fast as I can. If I want to work 7 days, weeks, post-acquisition to do this faster, let me do it. I don't even need any money for it. I don't care about the salary or the title. Just make sure that the kind of price that we put in the SPA is decent." So don't think it could be my imagination, but I never had some sort of moment where I felt, well, that's going to cost me like 15% in discount to not lock myself in, because all they wanted was a good integration, and we delivered that.
Awesome.
So then those are your exciting middle periods. I guess that's what is the months that those companies working. So you have 18, 14, 16, looking at through the 3 different exits. And so Yahoo, Outbrain, Visible. And when you're thinking, say you're working you're doing the work at the entity to get those deals done, to get the integration work done. How do you actually decide on what to work on next? What is your emotional state like, or are you just kind of like super hardcore? You're like,
Do you
this
sit and
is
write your book of everything you hate, or is it like something you've been doing
So
every day or every time something pisses you off?
what I do, I'm not sure how you feel, but going back to my point from earlier, max focus. Anybody will tell you that they're focused. They're not, for the most part. You'll ask them 3 questions, and they'll have a yes to all 3, and they'll all pass. They'll remove them from the focus that just told you that they had. But extreme focus to me is one for where if you're just a little bit entrepreneurial, you'll spot discrepancies in the universe at all times. You're standing in line at Citibank thinking, what is going on here? I should start a retail bank. You are trying to buy something on the internet. It doesn't work as you had hoped for. You're using some software application. It doesn't do the segmentation you imagined. Like many things, you'll spot things you feel are wrongs. And what you shouldn't do is, yes, let me just hash out some notes or ideas or speak to my friends or angel invest along this kind of dimension. I feel almost unfaithful if I think about another entrepreneurial idea while I'm doing one venture. Like, I already have a girlfriend. What are you doing, Dennis? This is not cool. But what I do though is I immediately pull it out of my brain and add it to what I call my little list of hate. I never add anything which I think is a good idea. I only add things that I dislike, as in things that should have given me a better experience. Well, I didn't like this, I added to the list. It's mostly just one-liners. I never look at the list. It's just a, pretty much first in, last out type list where I just keep adding to it. And then once I get to the end of a venture, whatever the outcome might be, I go back and I have a look at my list of hate, which is funny.
Girlfriends.
It is just super interesting because now I'm free. I can go have a look at the list. First of all, half the list is just one angry board. Like, this is not even an idea. Like, you should just sleep a little longer, Dennis. Just delete that. And then the other half is, fair enough. That didn't work. Let me see if that's been solved. Yeah. Frank actually got started on something similar. He's now working on it. Good on him. Once he's finished, I'll kind of go and subscribe to that. And then some parts of it are still kind of little defects in the universe. Ooh, interesting. Then we can talk about the whole process I do after that. But that's my selection list. And I tried to take those, and I think it was 17 pages this time around. Okay, damn, that was a lot. Kind of call that list down to things that are worthy my kind of research. And then I have a whole number of steps after that. But that I find...
The cats agree.
It's my evil backdrop.
He agrees, yeah.
So
It sounds
just
yeah.
willing,
I just
explaining, like, ooh, here is something, and then I get started on it. I give you one.
just Dennis, I wanna go back to something because this all sounds very logical to me, like a process that works and it's ideal, and you go immediately to the next thing, and there's no sort of emotion and feelings. In looking at your website, there's this one little that icon. Is that a company that did not work, the food delivery marketplace? So what was the process there when things weren't really working as expected? And like, is there a process at all, or how was your sort of feelings at that time?
So here's one of my opinions, which I'm not even sure I fully agree with, but I believe in it. Like, for all the wrong reasons possibly, but I believe in it. So many people, books on my shelf here, will speak of the magical pivot. And I'm just not a fan of the pivot. I think a startup is a single experiment where Teddy and Dennis had an idea for some particular retail analytics we could do. And we got started on it, assembled the team, leaned in, spent years on it. But our job was not to survive at all cost. Our job was to run the retail analytics experiment and die on that hill. As in, well, either we weren't good enough, it wasn't our time, we were too early, couldn't raise the capital, like 100 reasons that you go die. But that's the experiment. And for that particular venture, we're very early. So we got started at the same time as Just Eat in Europe, perhaps 6 months later or something like that. They went with the marketplace, which is that, well, like seamless, right? We'll just list all the restaurants and you can buy your Thai food from this place. And that was a good idea because on anything which is not good, you don't really blame the marketplace unless all the actors on the marketplace are bad. But if some of them are okay, then you blame the vendor. And what we did was a slightly different bend that, well, we will take in food from all sorts of vendors, rebrand it so we can mark it up ever so slightly, add a different type of service and commitments, SLA, if you will, just for food, and did very well on ramping up revenue and ramping up a bigger margin than the marketplace. Those run at 4, 5, 6, 7% if they're really squeezing it, right? We were running at 20-ish%. So a very different take, but there's one flaw in that. We take the blame. And I should have, had I been a fan of the pivoted to the marketplace. I was unwilling. I wanted to be a new type of brand and a new type of vendor where I could conceptually end up on these marketplaces, even though I also used vendors that would just get my packaging and guidelines and so on and so forth. But we died on that. Spent 18 months and yeah.
And did you raise
Sorry,
capital
I
on
wanted
that
to
one?
joke. So the lesson learned is you should pivot.
Yeah, but
I know, and I'm kidding. It's a style.
So
I understand. Because if you start and you think you're going to pivot, that it's like going to war and thinking about peace. It's like
So there's no version where you and me in the late 30s agree to attack Poland. Then on our way there, we say,
like,
you know what?
What about peace? Yeah, exactly.
We should attack Sweden instead. Like, what? Like, we used to have that grand speech 200 kilometers from here where you kind of painted a picture of what type of Europe this could be. And all of a sudden we're attacking Sweden? What the hell? I probably picked the wrong side in this analogy. But
Denmark, I mean, I'm sure at one point you guys attacked Sweden. It was 1730.
I'll go back some extra years of my new analogy. But in that regard, you're on a mission. And if you really want a mission-driven company, changing the mission, again, I feel embarrassed. Like, Teddy and Dennis went to war. And then halfway there, Dennis changed the enemy. Like, not cool. Like, no, we went to war, we went in one direction, we gave it our all, we lost. Thank you very much.
How did that feel after you lost? And what was the time between losing and figuring out your next thing?
2 days.
So that one
22 hours.
Like, fuck that.
that one hurt a little extra because I funded that myself.
And how old were you?
29 perhaps. So I'm one of those kids who ended up on the right side of the dot-com boom. So we did log file analytics back in the mid-90s and got acquired our first company in April of 2000. So when people talk about the dark ages in 2000, I think of them in very different ways because we got out when the NASDAQ was still above 5,000. So in that regard, it was just perfect timing. And that gave me a few finances. So I was both founder shares and preferred shares in that particular next venture, which I ramped up. It was obviously, to this day, which you should never do. I have this, I should go back and revisit it. I still think it's a good idea, but there was a few kinks and now I spent 20 years rethinking it. I'll go back. But I think it's like, anything which you set off on New Year's Eve, and once you put it on fire, don't fucking walk back to it. Like, just look at it. If it doesn't explode, just leave it, man. But here we are.
So
I
okay,
immediately got started on the next thing.
immediately.
Yeah.
Got it. Because you have a list of things that you work on and you're just aggressive with it.
Yeah.
But can I zoom on that?
It's
Because
fascinating.
I understand the process, but to me, how do you take whatever you come with, a couple of ideas, you go through them, you're like, okay, I can do that. So you kind of see if someone else did it and if no one did it. But let's say you have 2 or 3 of them, like you have to
Yeah.
choose between 2 or 3. Are you addressing it based on how much you're pissed at them, or how much you can assemble a team, how much you're
I'll
an
give you a
expert
few
at that, like,
steps.
or is it just how much you think you can achieve it? Like, what's the no?
So I think if you're even just a half decent entrepreneur, falling in love, that's the easy part. So I love all these, like my little babies. They're all
Which one
just,
do you marry?
they're beautiful, all of them. Why would I throw anyone in their way? So I'm not the one who should sit there and decide. So what I do, I'll give you a few points. There's kind of many steps in this process. But what I then do at some inflection point, 2 or 3 steps down, is that I call for, depending on the type of idea, 3, 4, 5 full days where I assemble a team. Again, depending on the idea. If we take visual revenue, so 2 engineers, 2 data scientists, and 2 kind of commercials people from the media space. 6 people. They turn up in New York on Monday. I pay for the tickets and what have you, and I have an agenda for the full week. I'll give you the primary purpose of that, which is not to kind of sit there and pat Dennis on the back, as in I can buy love elsewhere for money. That's easy enough. Don't kind of put that on TikTok out of context.
It's perfect. It's another
What I
T-shirt.
do is that I ask them to help me kill this idea, which is that your purpose as you arrive here is to persuade me to not do it. It is my job to have done enough research to see if I can defend. Because if you can turn up here as an expert just in your field, in your particular vertical, and somehow kind of shit on the parade and me not being able to kind of defend it, well, either I didn't do enough research or the idea just wasn't good enough. So we sit there day in and day out, certainly multiple days. VR was a full week, and try to kill the idea. If we could somehow survive that, well, there was 5, 6 good people who I trust, who knew that you can't be rude here. You can be rude if you don't come up with good ideas for how to kill it. Then you leave as an amateur. So you should really be aggressive. But if you somehow can survive it, okay, now I have something where I can take it to the next step. And I've had multiple ideas that died on the table. I'll give you one. To this day, I actually still think I could pull it off. And I think there's reasons for why it would work. I had this idea where it reached this step. There was the retail analytics idea I talked about with Teddy. So you walk down Fifth Avenue, and one day I spot some not even young woman, young girl in the window. So what do you pay? Let's say somewhere between $900 and $1,500 a square feet on Fifth Avenue, on some massive kind of retail street. And you look and you see, oh, they have 3 windows, X number of square feet. And then I come by the window, perhaps 2 weeks later, and it's the same stuff they have in the window. First of all, and then start to imagine, who decided how that window was dressed? What is the purpose of that window? Where did it come from? How much autonomy did that girl who looked 19 have in setting up that window? What type of analytics, if any, probably none do they do? And then I could see, ooh, there's probably some sort of A/B testing / multivariate testing one could do on these windows. So what if I put up 4 cameras, one in each corner, so I could start to both track people who pass, figure out based on their clothing, age, and other kind of dimensions, who they are, look at what they actually look at in their window, see if they actually enter, see if what is in the window and what they look at, is that aligned to what they buy? And all of a sudden, we could start to kind of run this as an experiment, very similar to a landing page. Why is that? Why is the whole thing similar at the beginning of the month and the end of the month? Shouldn't it be attached to some sort of paycheck? Why are you showing things in the window that you think...
So that's good. And what killed it?
back when I had that idea, there was simply not enough bandwidth for video, so that you would
Okay.
have to do it on site, meaning I have to kind of somehow turn into a mini Verizon with a ton of trucks running around maintaining hardware at retail stores. Now you could probably do the whole thing in the cloud. That's the one part. Plus the level of accuracy on predictions, on actually what you look at, and so on and so forth, were not as good. So if I couldn't do that well, then then I couldn't really do the predictions I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was to say the whole purpose is to have somebody grab that door handle and walk in the store. I said, you should not show anything that people buy. You should only show things that have people walk in the front door. Then you can sell them on the other side, which is kind of like a wine glass in your funnel here. So
Yeah.
I love that idea.
And did you ever interact with any of the retailers on the other end? I always think like I did a lot of sales to retail on like payments platforms, luxury messaging application, and and what I've always encountered is one resistance to the idea of the window, not just selling, but you're taking the art and the creativity out of it, and two, it just takes forever for them to get any deals done. That was the thing that killed my luxury messaging application, which was nobody wanted to get any deals done. They wanted to control it. And LVMH is like, we're just going to do it ourselves. Like, you know.
So in my initial kind of chats, so the whole thing died on kind of hardware maintenance and prediction quality.
Got
Many
it.
other things, but it certainly died on that. Not so much on the initial chats I had with retailers. Small retailers were not yet ready because they didn't have the kind of agility to go change this. Because they thought there was some sort of, and that was true for them, real cost associated with setting the window. For some inflection point, once you get into the many hundreds of stores, they are already making an investment. And for them, setting the window, that's a small cost. And they actually already did analytics on this, but through surveys. So they would do surveys in one area and get enough kind of input, and then they'll spread that as saying, hey, we work at Gap or IKEA, and now I know something. And they would do that quarterly or half yearly, and that'll be their kind of analytics. So they were quite excited, even if they didn't do any changes, just to at least have the information. Then we might not be as agile as you imagine. I thought, sure, then the analytics will be one cost. What action you take, the more actions you take, of course, the more I can charge. But I could certainly see, imagine, I didn't get there, that once I got into the hundreds of stores, they started to have this particular function where they already did this.
You make me think about a couple of things, but to me, the main thing about why it's the messy middle and not the very clear middle, it's, I guess, the difference of style. And that's what's cool when we start to interview founders, everybody's different. I know I'm messier than you, but it's kind of weird because we do have some common process. So I had a similar idea about camera and data, and I thought about it like in marketing, you know, you've got total addressable market, and I always think about total addressable data, where I'm like, why don't we capture temperature, the volume, the whatever, like billions of data points that are not there? And I thought about that for a meeting because I was sitting in a meeting and I was like, oh my God, this seems boring. And does anyone track the return on meetings? And then I started to think about all of that. But then I'm like, am I willing to commit like 6 years of my life on that? And I'm like, it's like some stuff or like, it looks like whatever you pick, you're just zooming it. And I'm curious, or if there's no element of suffering for the next 5 to 6 years, which you know will happen. Like, don't you need some kind of motivation or energy that goes beyond the opportunity to kind of go that way? Or is it the money, or is it the team, or whatever excites you in this 6 months, 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, whatever the cycle is? And I understand it's the sports. I love rugby. It's not. I used to play when I was younger, and I love the game, but I'm not looking forward, getting punched in the face, for it. It's like, you see what I mean? It's like the suffering doesn't offset any of your opportunities.
Yeah, I never have that emotion attached.
So your human stack, basically, like whatever comes in the stack is gonna go through the Dennis processing. It's up.
But
that's cool. That's really cool.
And I'm not suggesting that. So every day is just all sunshine. There's certainly days for where you lose a good engineer, or you see a good customer churn, or the
You don't
infrastructure
care.
you built wasn't everybody. Like, I have all the same days. It's all the same, right? But for some, that 0 to 1 is friction so costly that they can barely imagine doing another venture because they thought imagined for realties, it came at cost that they just can't bear again. For me, I find that 0 to 1 almost romantic. As in, I don't know about you guys, but I like the whole, well,
You-
you know, we have a half-baked team, no customers, no money, no prospects, no leads. Nobody
I love
likes
it.
my fucking, like, it's all just uphill. Ooh, then I get one like.
When I listen to you, if I may try an analogy, but tell me if it's correct, but I kind of see you as like a human startup compiler. And it's like you're going to push it until segfault or until it outputs something. Is that like it's and you cannot change the script, it's like it's there. It's not going to move. No.
So if you write assembly, which I did for 6 years straight, perhaps
By the way,
build
just real quick, there has to be some AI startup that's going to just look at the architecture of something and make it in assembly easily.
here's another.
That's another one. Sorry. Well,
This took me perhaps a decade just as an engineer. So back, and you sound old when you say that, but there was a time where there was a real value to optimization. Today, almost nobody optimizes much. A little bit, like, okay, fair enough. This is turning into a mini data kind of run. We should probably not do it in Python.
Yeah.
We'll turn it into C++.
Oh no, it's even worse now. It's like, should it be 90 billion parameter or 50?
Exactly. So everything's just not aggressively optimized. I like that whole finding that inner loop. Okay, you start to kind of counting clock cycles. Okay, I got 178 clock cycles. And then you find some sort of, I do a mul here, like multiply is just very expensive on the processor. But I never multiply by anything bigger than 10. Great. I could just turn it into a set of ads. Like I just cut like 8, 10, 12 clock cycles. And I spent like 2 days just combing through it to kind of find something where, yeah, nice. Then I'll spend another 2 days finding another div. Like, who the fuck does any div in assembly that's super expensive? Like, you can barely cope with it in some sort of inner loop. I can build a div without using the kind of div that comes with a kind of traditional kind of CISC processor. Nice. I'll spend 2 days on kind of removing this div. So I took joy in that. And then might have carried over to the whole kind of 0 to 1, which is the same. Like, yeah, you all here had sat like trying to kind of get that first customer. Or that first beta user, that first kind of poke of your platform, right? I'm at that stage right now. Our last venture, Launch Brightly, where we do kind of automated product screenshots. We spent a year in the basement, like a year.
How did you come with this idea? By the way, like how did that ended up on your list of frustrating things? Like, was it like your own support team that like struggled to? Yeah.
So if you're a founder, especially in early stage startups, you're many things, but you're certainly the primary and key support individual. For you'll go defend your product anywhere in public. You do that talk, do that podcast, you do that response to that tweet where they didn't like it, you do that blog post, you'll do many things, including kind of massaging your kind of help articles, even going through the kind of queue. Like, I love. And I think any kind of founder who doesn't kind of work the queue on an almost daily basis, do you really care? Like, we should really make a list of things Dennis do not like. So do you really care if you don't work a set of tickets every day? Because that is, the smallest delta between kind of your product and your audience, that is you kind of working those tickets. Once you get to some sort of dashboard made for the CEO, the delta is just too wide to get much information, really. So I love kind of working that. One of the things that hurt if you're a product CEO is that you really like your product, like you're proud of it. And then you go look at some article. some CX person took some screenshot. It's like 7 weeks delayed, a little bit kind of rotten, like, but why? Then I'll go in, I'll use my own account, I'll put it in the right state, kind of inspect element, kind of tune it, do the kind of perfect screenshot, style it, do the annotation, like, well, then I kind of add it, I use it, and then in 4 weeks, because you have some engineering agility, it's rotten again. So it was on my list of things where, first of all, why am I doing this? Well, because I care, and it's 11 p.m., and I probably shouldn't text anybody of them doing a screenshot at 11 p.m., so I'll just do it myself. So it's just an item on the list. Doesn't mean it should be a company, but somehow I spotted it a couple of times. By the way, I see many repeats, like I'll get angry multiple times, and they'll rhyme with each other. Like, oh yeah, a year later I said the same thing. Well, you obviously don't like it. So it's just on the list. And I thought there might be an opening now to kind of create some sort of Zapier-like set of recipes for where people in CX can build the recipes. Then I can rerun that in the cloud, like spin up some Chrome browser in the cloud, set it in some distinct mode, size, width, dark, light, language, so on and so forth, render it, do all sorts of kind of steps, set it up in the right kind of mode, and kind of take the screenshot and draw on it, and kind of log into your Zendesk, scan the article, see if they're out of sync, and replace it. Like, oh, how awesome would that be for where the kind of truth, which is the product, and what you show people in support, they're just the same. So yeah, that's how I got started. But there was a few kind of kinks and proof points, but I kind of overcame them, and then
no, I like the process, and I like that you don't deviate, and you're really dead focused on delivering. We're coming to the end of a discussion, and after that I want to open it to Teddy and Gabriel. I wanted you to reflect on you're at 60%, I guess, of your startup journey. If we expand to your vision of doing like 4 or 5 more, and I guess being older, and I remember these days too. Although we can talk about that later, but I did meet people who were optimizing down to a bit, so I guess we came after that. You went through assembly, floppy, higher languages, objects, web. And now we're starting with AI, which of course you know very well. Like, are you excited about, like, do you try to think of it as the mentality of building product on these stacks is very different? Do you see a change? I guess the caricature is the Sam discussion about like the 1% startup. Like, do you see yourself? I don't know, I'm just curious about reflection, and does nothing change, or is it the same thing for you, or like the technology does allow you maybe to to do things faster, better, whatever. It's like just general question of that.
So I'm generally very optimistic. I think there's all sorts of real productivity gains for startups where you can accelerate beyond what you used to be able to do. I said, what should
and you saw it. Sorry, and you saw it before anyone else. Like, I mean, x.ai was what, like 7 years ahead.
I had an intimate relationship with making predictions. So our prior startup to that, we did predictive analytics for media. So we've done predictions for a decade and a half. And one of the bigger hurdles, certainly in the past, was assembling a good, well-annotated data set, which came typically at high cost. And now there might be some sort of moment where you can certainly take advantage of either other people's data set or more generic data sets, and don't have to kind of overinvest to the degree that we've done. Side note, we had 101 people alone doing nothing but annotating meeting emails for 4 years to assemble a little bit above 32 million distinct hand-labeled data points on about 45 intents and 3 entities. Tick, 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 tick. 4 years, like a massive data set for where now you could probably not go without it, but probably don't have to invest that aggressively into that particular data set, because at that point, language was not solved. I'm not saying it's solved today, but we're certainly closer to it being solved than we were before. So all we could do was try to carve out a corner of the language universe and say, hey, perhaps we can navigate that part of the universe, which we ended up being able to do, but at high cost. So that brings us back to what you said, Frank, which is, hey, now 5 guys in the basement can do things they just couldn't do yesterday. And that, I think, is just exciting. And I'm a huge fan of kind of technology that kind of democratized access to kind of new ideas being put out into this world. So awesome, like big fan. And I do, that's the one part, like that kind of raw productivity increase that comes with that. Then on the other side, I do think there's a whole host of possible new ideas or new brands of ideas. And we've seen many of them, which are now just asking questions to different data sets. I'm not talking about that, but like new, true, novel ideas that we just couldn't do before. That excites me. That's the one part. What also excites me, and perhaps it's because I was embedded in that environment with x.ai for so long, that the conversational UI might finally arrive. Not to replace all other prior UI paradigms. I think it will still be a mix, but I actually do think the conversational UI will now be a real contender beyond, what time is it, play some music, set a timer, like, the basics, but
return to Zork.
Yeah, like real usage. So that's my excitement.
I could talk about that for hours, but I want to pass it to Gabriel. But we'll
that's well, cool. It's. I mean, we're nearing the end, as you said, Frank. I mean, this has been a whirlwind of a conversation, Dennis, and one that I'm still trying to pierce the I want to hear some emotions other than it's exciting and everything. We haven't heard any tough stories, like extremely tough stories yet, but we'll save that for a second interview. And
we should do a debate. We should have now that we start to have different type of founders who clearly have different styles to the point they would highly disagree about what to do with it. It would be fun.
It's amazing. So, because we're the total
different.
opposite.
Everybody's different.
Everybody's different. How we approach these things, and it's one. Well, yeah, but one reason why I think is because I'm not an engineer, and I, I'm a foo creative business guy. But it's. I just wanted to say it's impressive to see, just the way that you approach life. And also how you approach the entrepreneurial life are able to, keep going. It's
the recording will be uploaded, so we'll just.
So I'll give you another data point here, which I sometimes see people immediately push back and say, "Hey, Dennis, I get it. First of all, I think on the inside you're probably sad, but you're not willing to say so. But hey, I'll listen to your story for a little bit longer. But it must have come at some sacrifice. Let me ask you about a few things. But most of the things which they'll ask about, I somehow managed to assemble at the same time. So I did all my startups with kids. I somehow ended up having kids early. We can talk about that. That was not by design. I made an error. We're still together, coming up 30 years on December 3rd this year. So I did all of them with kids. From the very first one where I had my first kid and just did the whole thing with all the kind of positive challenges that comes with running a family.
Which that's
we didn't even get into. None of us had kids, so at some point we need to bring some more people with kids on.
I'm getting married next month, and then family is next. But that could be another debate we can talk about later. But I remember a friend of mine who had kids that actually having kids helped him to be more focused, and actually he saw that as a value for his startup. And I just saw a study this morning that shows that when you get married and have kids, your income increase because I guess there's some kind of a constant, pressure for outcome that kind of comes. So that could be an old podcast subject about like the very clear middle, the unmessy middle with kids.
Yeah. I don't know if we can get Dennis to be Dennis is going to have to be the guest host on that because none of us have kids. So and only two of us are married right now.
If we do it,
so you're on the sales side, right? On the commercial side, yeah. By the way, there's only two people in a startup, and anybody who has any other title is an idiot. You're either a maker or a seller, and you have to be able to say what you are. And by the way, in many of my ventures, I very quickly moved from the maker side to the seller side. So I've been on the seller side and find immense joy in it. And I think it's a unique craft. And if you're not if you don't really have some inner seller in you, it's going to be very hard for you to do any type of startup. Now, that aside, to kind of pair it with the family part, I actually think some of the best founder sellers that I've seen, and again, bias alert, are people who somehow were able to assemble a family at the same time. Because what's not good selling are people in panic or people who need to close. What's really good selling is not selling at all and being just very enthusiastic about what you have. You obviously want them to use your product, and people can see in you whether they are being sold or whether there's some sort of advocate at my office who's super fucking enthusiastic about their product, and I also want to be part of that. And I think if you can sit in some meeting knowing that, you know what, I have 3 women at home who all love me. There's nothing you can say to me in this meeting, whether we close or not, that's going to change that. I already won in life. So hey, let me use that whiteboard and I'll tell you why I think it's exciting. And I think that that look is very hard to fake. So I think it does wonders for your kind of sales gene. It's going to bring along a few people who will just love you, no matter what.
Aw.
Well, wonderful. I think we should close on that note. We like to do a quote. I don't know, Dennis, do you have a quote? We didn't ask you beforehand, but we always like to say if you have a favorite quote or something that is important to you, we'd love to share it with our audience.
It's going to be in Danish.
No, only the brave. I like that backdrop. Many things in life takes a little bit of bravery. Not because it's necessarily dangerous, but because we put up barriers ourselves. So only the brave. And I like kind of having that in mind that, yeah,
Nice.
Dennis, just jump in. It's not as deep as you think, or at least you'll find out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. This has been a exciting middle, as we like to now call it for this episode.
This was
Thank you, Dennis.
very fun.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.